the journey that they spoke about, I don't come from a family of artists or performance. I'm from that one time Pune, now Pune, and then eventually after my BA in economics, puppetry was a hobby in Pune. I went to Ahmedabad to the NID, National Institute of Design, and at the same point of time, my hobby became a little more professional because I was involved in the evenings at Darpana Academy of Performing Arts. Mernalini Sarabhai, Malika today, they had a puppet section. And towards the end of my studies at NID, there was the ISRO, Space Application Center then, and we had the SITE experiment, Satellite Instructional TV Experiment, you know, Professor Jaspal, Kiran Karnik, and Dr. Vikram Sarabhai's idea, he passed away, but his idea was for that program, the educational program, everyone young should come in, and it would be their first job or whatever. So the satellite was from USA, but for the internal area, 6 or 7 states were selected, and there were educational programs which were made. And the Earth station was in Ahmedabad at ISRO. So they wanted a puppet lab there set up for the InSight, not through the satellite, but InSight, the Nadia Page transmission. And that is where my puppetry in '76 became a profession, and from there on it's history. So why puppetry? It's not conventional puppet. You have traditional forms of puppetry. I am not a traditional puppet artist. I combine performance art, if you want to call it whatever you want, but puppetry not as a means, as an ends in itself, be all and all, but as a means of communicating. So in my work, and in what we call the Ishara Puppet Theatre in Delhi, we synergize, we mix dance, movement, puppets, masks, music, actors, and we've always been working within this. Puppets is the focus. The most recent production, wow, it's almost a year old, was Rumiana, and you will see some things of that, which is based on the poetry of Mevlana Rumi, if you know. I hope you know who he is. And we interpreted that through music, through animation, through visuals, through dance. And I will also demonstrate one of the puppets here. And the idea was that the message was inclusive. It was open to all. And our music did not stick to one area of Balkh or Iran or Turkey. It was universal. And that was the idea. And most interesting, it's been the performance, a new performance when we get one show after 6-7 months, but it started in December 2022. And since then, we've done around 11 or 12 shows, which we've never had this thing. I don't know what. It's Rumi or it's the performance, and it's a collective work. In our work, puppetry, it's never solo. There are many people involved, and that balance has to be kept. What is puppetry? The word in English is puppet, okay? Problem here is that in Hindi we say Katputli or Kaat ki putli, but that only is from Rajasthan. Luckily we have that many languages in India, and each of our states, 7 or 8 states, have traditional puppetry. Yeah? Andhra Pradesh, Tolu Bomalatam, Tolu as in leather, Bomma as in figure, and Attam as the play. So in India and Southeast Asia, the puppet form is known from the material, not from the technique. In the West, string puppet, rod puppet, hand puppet, things like that. Except maybe in Bengal, we do not know why. Tarer putul, your danger putul, stick puppets, whatever. How do you define a puppet? Today they say that an inanimate object that is given life, whether human person moving it or animatronics, whatever, becomes a puppet. So I can take an object, a shoe, and animate it and give it life. It could be called a puppet. So a traditional artist would say, no, it has to be figurative. But the idea of a puppet is illusion. You're projecting. Puppeteer, it's a medium like anything else. Your pencil, your song, your dance, whatever, it's a medium. I have something in my hand, and there is an audience, and there's me, and for those 15 minutes, you put your emotion into this cup and I put my emotion, only then it comes alive. It's not just one way. That's why I was speaking in the beginning about the audience. So there is a term, and it's been very difficult to find or transliterate that into Hindi, willing suspension of disbelief. So you know I'm working this thing right behind you, and when it works well, you will see you believe that it is alive. Or for that few minutes, you put your emotion in it. Only then it comes alive. What is a puppet? Again, I've got a piece of cloth, okay? And I've got some rubber bands. This is the most easy thing that can be done anywhere. And I put a rubber band here. I put one rubber band here. And what happens is the way I move it or animate it gives you a connection with something that you already know. So if I do this, or if I do this, now there is nothing here on top. No head, no eyes, no nothing. But for those 2 seconds, you connect with what you know of reality. So if I do this, or if I do this, if I do this, if I did this, it would be something else. What is this? This is that willing suspension of disbelief. Then slowly, it becomes more and more real. Exercise puppets, no face, no emotion. We have to show the emotion. What is happening? And then slowly this becomes this, which is normally called a hand or a glove puppet, which most schools use. There is no costume, there is no face, but I have to give movement doesn't mean just shaking. Movement means less is more. Illusion, no legs. I have to make it walk. Okay? Walk. Okay? Look up, look down. It's basic techniques, ABCD. And then eventually it becomes a simple puppet, like all your text, all your things are already done here. Normally you do it over a screen or so, but in our theater we are using puppets and objects seen. You see us while we're doing it. Normally we've tried to be in darker clothes, but you normally would wear something less bright. Puppets have been used for generations. Tradition, people believe there is some texts that say that it started in India, that they're ephemeral, okay? They disintegrate. So we don't have objects except on terracotta. But there is a saying that a human being who doesn't use his brain is like a puppet without the puppeteer. So there is some sort of things like that which were there centuries ago. And for me, what is exciting is to work in a team, music, most important, music for me, and movement, text after that. And we've experimented with a lot of things. In Rumi, Rumiana, the performance was, I cannot read Farsi or Persian, so it came from a transliteration, also a translation, and more a white Orientalist translation of a poem called Who is at My Door? And Who is at My Door is the Shams and Rumi, the master and the student wants to go into the door. The master says, you're not ready until you have experienced life, until you have done this, until you've done that, only then in the end come. And in our performance, then in the end, the master gives his robe to the student. That's how it is. It's about an hour long. But then there were little stories inside it, which are existential, which are about freedom. There is one very interesting one, is the grammarian, as it's called, and the boatman. Our version was twisted a bit. The man comes with all his degrees, all his education, and comes to the river and wants to get into the boat. So the boatman asks him, but can you swim? So he says, no, I can't. So he said, then what was the knowledge that you got? You didn't have this practical knowledge. There is a storm, and in the original story, the guy drowns. In our story, he's cleansed of all the baggage that he carries through life. So we interpreted these sort of things. There's a story, famous one, about the bird, and caged bird in the golden cage, and this fellow from India trades with Bukhara, and he's bought this beautiful parrot, has everything in its life. He feeds it, he's got this cage, he's going back, and the bird asks his pet, what can I give message to your cousins if I meet them? He says, tell them everything, that I've got this fantastic life, I'm living in this beautiful cage. And he says, okay, so when he goes back to wherever Bukhara and trees, birds, he says this. And at that point, one bird falls dead. So he gets shocked. He says, my tongue was so terrible that what I said killed a bird. Now we don't know if the bird died or what. So he comes back and he tells the caged bird, what happened? This is what happened. So the caged bird thinks for a second and also falls dead, fakes death in the cage. So he cries, he opens the cage, and the bird flies out. He says that was the message that came from there. So these were parable stories that we did without words, with music. I'll show you some pictures. And then you have, say, 4 basic techniques of puppetry all over the world. Strings, okay, hands, rods, shadow puppets. So these are all over the world, and then there are more. So you will see the way we work with puppets, with music, with objects, but visually powerful. Yeah. The flute is very important in the Rumi thing. Yeah. And first time we use a lot of animation on the back, visual things. So, yeah. And each time, in each story, the door that is at the back projected starts fading because he comes to the barrier and then it overcomes. When you start music, when you start your practice, you always do with stock music. You know, you don't know what to use, whatever, and then slowly the fellow comes times. So we were working with some Sitaish, that is an Iranian group which performs, and his voice, it's almost like a Gregorian chant, and worked beautifully with the movement. When Sandeep Pillai said, we're not going to use this, what can we do? So he said, okay, give me some time, and he mixed 3 to 4 chants. First was Ek Omkar, then it goes into an azan, then it goes into a Lord's Prayer, then it goes into a Buddhist chant, and he mixed these while performing. And we were a little worried at the end, somebody will take umbrage, but it has gone, we performed everywhere. So it's interesting how puppetry is sometimes called an objective theater. It's like a mirror. I am on stage as an actor and you are the audience. We call it subjective, flesh and blood, flesh and blood. But when you see the puppet, it's very often that you can say things through it which the actor cannot say in a sensitive situation. You have political satire with puppets on TV. We've done lots of, in the early 2000s, we had a UNESCO project on substance abuse, drug abuse, and HIV awareness. And we couldn't go as actors and show things on stage. It became sensitive to the schools. Today, maybe it's possible. It was done through objects and puppetry. 15-minute shows which went through very well, and then there were discussions, okay? I'll show you, we'll demonstrate, we'll move one of the puppets, how 3 people come together. This technique of using 3 people comes from Japan, actually, the most traditional and most perfectionist puppetry, the Bunraku puppet theater, where the person who's holding the head in full costume takes 11, 12 years to come there, then the left hand and then the leg. We practice and we manage. We'll start from there, right? Just a little clip of how 3 people come to work together. So thank you, Ishara. That's how we work. You saw a little bit of the glimpse of what we do. Thank you very much.